Welcome to Brightly, you radiant being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. Each episode, we share soul driven advice and topics to help you live more brightly in mind, body, and spirit. Through sharing our experiences, friendship, and passions, we hope to impact you to step more brightly into yourself inch by inch.
Hey there.
Hi, Amy.
How are you,
Good
Tracy?
to see you. I am wondering, or have been wondering, how is the business of you going? Are you still in assessment mode?
Yeah. So here's the thing with trying to sort of create this business of myself is it's not a quick or easy process.
Oh, I love that
So
you're yes. What a
yeah.
great thing for people to understand, right? That
Yeah.
it's not this bright, shiny thing all the time. It's the hard, gritty work.
Yeah, and it's also I find myself going back over things again, and not to the point where it's like I never move forward. I just always look back. But as I do each step in it, then I'm like, oh, so in the gap analysis, if I'm like, oh, in order for me to get from this point to that point, I have to do this thing. And that showed up in my weaknesses over here,
Mhm.
in the SWOT analysis. So now I have to be like, okay, now I have to figure out how do I like pull that apart and act in a different way. So yes, it's still ongoing. It still is pretty much in assessment mode, but it's also in baby step actually trying mode.
So, I mean, this is an assessment of you to your core, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is, a bigger goal, or, you have a different outcome for different things. This isn't about like launching you as a brand or like going public or
No,
something
I'm
like a
not going to be
company.
an influencer.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is some deep work, like you said, and it's all about you and the gap analysis, especially, right? You're trying to figure out why you haven't gotten to where you want to be. So, have there been any roadblocks to that internally when things come up? Anything that's like, nope, I don't want to talk about that, or no, blame, shame game? You don't have to
Yeah.
give specifics, but is
No, I
that
won't give
happening?
specifics. Yes, yes, it
Okay.
does. And the minute those come up, it is kind of like, I mean, I'm at first I wasn't good at it. I'm getting a little better at it now that when those rear their head, it's like, now wait a minute, is that true? So I then sort of have this little dialogue with myself. Not always. I don't always catch it.
Hmm.
Not right at the moment when I should be catching it. But yes, because there is that part of us that's like, we're just fine where we are.
Ooh. Oh, and that goes back to the fear episode that we had
Yeah.
a little while back. Maybe even just the last one. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, facing your fears.
yeah.
But also, I wonder too, sometimes that we're fine where we are is because you don't want to dig deep to find out the cause of
Yeah.
why I'm okay here or why I don't want to move forward, right?
Yes.
And we spend like so much of what you're doing, you're not doing it with a therapist, you're not doing it with a friend, you're doing it on your own. It's your little me, myself, and I conversation, right?
Yes.
And so you can get into some patterns with that conversation, and especially with negative self talk, right? Like,
Right.
while we hope people are, gaslighting themselves up, sometimes we can gaslight ourselves in the other direction. And so we talk a lot about how well we know ourselves, in terms of, am I living my best life? Am I living from my values? Am I living in joy? Right.
Right.
And within that, we also talk a lot about, how the people you choose to spend your time with, and how to handle. We've had a couple episodes on relationships lately. But I'm just curious, like, as you're doing this assessment, you might be hitting these roadblocks or these stalls or the places that get kind of sticky. Have you ever assessed like your relationship with yourself?
I
Or
feel
have you ever even thought about that?
Yeah, I have thought about that. I think we did have an episode on something like that earlier, but I'd say that when you just asked me that right now, even though um, intellectually I could say, yeah, I've thought about that. I also had to be honest with myself and say, have you done it? What have you done for me lately? Right? Like,
Well,
have
but I'm
you done
wondering,
it
like,
lately?
so when it comes to like your relationship with self, and like what stage of relationship are you in with your myself and I, right? Like, are you dating? Have you been committed? Are you nearing divorce? If this is a business, is there a hostile takeover looming? Like, how's this partnership going? Which I know it sounds silly, but we so often say things like I told myself, right?
Right.
Or
It
I'm
doesn't,
assessing this
it,
and I said, and a part of me was like, no, we're fine. Like who's telling who what, right?
well,
Like there is this
Tracy,
separation.
I really do think that there is a separation because I think, and especially if depending on what kind of childhood you have, there could be a deep separation, right? But I do think that there's our outside self and our inside self, and that's where sometimes we don't have a relationship because we just ignore that inside self, or that inside self, if it is negative, it sort of runs the show. And then we're just like, that's our show. Like that's who we are, without questioning it, without questioning the relationship, right?
Well, and I think what happens and what I want to explore then in this episode is, does any aspect of those relationships with self, whoever you view as the core of you, the ultimate one in charge, or does it need healing? Does repair work need to happen?
Absolutely. Because the minute you just said that, all of a sudden I was like, that whoever that core self is of you, or however you worded that, all of a sudden it was like this little bubble of emotion started to come up. And then I went, where the hell are you? Like, what are you doing? Like, you, my core self,
Where
where
the
are
hell are
you?
you? So I, what we so often cover in the show is more about like goals. Am I the person I need to be able to get to where I want to go to? And am I acting from a place of integrity, right? Like do I like how I'm showing up in the world, and how do I need to move that needle? And like I think we skip some steps, because even before you work on your character, before you know what your goals are, like how do you talk to and treat yourself? Because you're your boss and you're also your employee.
Yeah.
And what kind of relationship is that? And what is your internal workplace culture? Just to take that metaphor that we've been using and drive it into the ground.
Workplace
But
culture.
like I want to introduce another assessment. Like maybe if you did the gap
Yeah.
assessment with your goals or some of the other ones we've talked about, and either they're feeling uncomfy, or you are kind of stalled out, or you're just really hyper focusing on problem solving in certain areas and not really looking at the gaps or root causes. Like I think a personal assessment of your negative self-talk and the culture of you, the inner you that you don't show to other people, might have many influences why it's there, but like have you, like we need a proper assessment of that, because I feel like it's going to be really uncomfortable and not fun driving yourself to achieve goals if you're being mean about it the entire time.
So that is very interesting because I feel like how I approach things, I've gotten fairly good at, um, okay, let me rephrase this. I think I've gotten fairly good at having positive self-talk. But just listening to this right now, damn you, self-awareness. I realize that what I've gotten really good at is just shoving those negative thoughts and self-talk to the side and being like, get over there in that corner. And I know they're still there kind of whispering, but I don't let them talk.
I wonder then if that could also, or parts of that at times could also be like a toxic positivity. Like,
yeah,
no, we
absolutely.
got that. We're doing this. We're doing it anyways. It doesn't matter how you're feeling.
Yes. And
we're gonna move forward and we're going to be happy.
It also, I'm sure there's a whole heck of a lot of more shadow work that has to be done around that, because I got to let them talk before I can figure out what it is, how I can help. Right.
Well, and I didn't even write this down in the notes, but there has to be like a coming together.
Yes.
And so it's not a me versus myself versus I, but all three are the integration. Yes. Love that word. Yes. So since I'm phrasing it as like a relationship with yourself, I kind of went to some relationship, quote unquote, experts for marriage.
Of course you do. I love that.
So the Gottmans are pretty famous in the world of marriage and family therapy. I will put the addendum that they tend to focus on couples already facing divorce. And so a lot of their advice and ways to fix or what they're talking about are already with people looking at that. It's through that lens, right? So it's not necessarily like, if you do or don't have these things, your relationship to yourself or to others is doomed. But I like how they phrase some of these ways in which you might be having negative self-talk. So again, the way that they use it's called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The way that they use these 4 concepts is for couples. I'm turning it inwards. So
yeah, I love that.
The 4 horsemen.
Know that we've mentioned it before, but
I love the Gottmans.
Yeah. And I love coming back to things. I think that you need to hear things over and over again. So I can't wait to hear how.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with these 4 because I think they're very relatable. And that maybe it's not what you do all the time, but you've probably have definitely done this to yourself and to others. And so I think it's a good jumping off point as you assess and give you ideas. There could be more than these 4. You could not have any of these 4. But so the 4 horsemen are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So criticism is, how critical are you of yourself? That's the big one, right?
Right.
Do you criticize yourself? Do you attack your own character? So an example of that is, you always do this. You are so selfish. You are so blank, right? So no one likes you.
Yeah, I am actually going to answer this. I will do that. Like, I might start doing it, and then I am immediately like,
it's good. So at least it sounds like you notice it, but I think it's really easy internally to label yourself, because you are the longest relationship you will ever have. No one knows you and you're bullshit like you. Right. So if you're incongruent or if you're not integrated, right, like it's going to show up as criticism. But when you're always criticizing yourself, you're going to get defensive with yourself as well.
Yeah, that's so true.
So that'll show up as typically a response to criticism, or it'll appear as a lack of responsibility, right? Like something happened and you are defensive to yourself and others, and you come up with excuses, right? It's kind of when that idea of treat yourself goes too far. Yeah. Where your self-care is not restorative. It's actually causing more problems.
Yeah. That defensiveness for me, that came up so much when I was overspending, and with the credit cards, it was like, I deserve this. Why wouldn't I do this? Well, of course I'm going to do this. I can just hear I can hear my brain back then just coming up with all these reasons.
it was with food. It was with eating out. It was,
Yeah.
and I've said this before, and sometimes I do need this, but it's like, oh, you need to outsource this, or this is easier. But it created more problems. I wasn't meeting my dietary goals. I was letting food go to waste in my home. I was wasting money on buying too much food, right? And like, I don't always need to have, because I had a bad day doesn't mean I get a caribou, right? Like, it's just like I was finding these ways to justify what I was doing
Right.
instead of fixing the bad day in the first place, right? Like,
Right.
and so sometimes you do need the reward. Sometimes you do need to treat yourself, but that's where this assessment piece goes on. Like, is it showing up as a lack of responsibility for some of the
Yeah.
issues you're facing?
Yeah.
So another one, and I think this is one a lot of people might not realize that they do, but it's contempt. And I
Yeah, let's
think,
talk about that. Like that sounds really bad.
and it feels to me like when I think about, and I'll give some examples, but it seems like the most visceral, like the one that could
Yes.
probably like poison the well the most. But it's when you
Oh.
disrespect, mock with sarcasm, ridicule, dismiss, or name call. I am so stupid. Tracy, you idiot. Tracy, why did you do this?
Okay,
Um,
mock with sarcasm. So when I hear that, because so often our humor is self oh, I lost the
deflection.
word. What?
Is it
No, not
deflecting?
deflection, where you're like saying, oh, well, I would try that on, but every time I do that, this happens. And
Oh,
you use it as humor, but it's
mm-hmm.
actually, I never thought of it as contempt. That makes it much more serious. Wow.
I mean, honestly, contempt to me is how many of us actually like ourselves?
Tracy, don't you remember? I like myself unconditionally.
That's really good. I'm glad you can say that, Amy.
No, but just because I sang it just did not
Uh-huh.
mean that I meant
Right?
it,
Like
that
how
I
many of
actually
us,
did it.
and we have a personal development podcast. And so this conversation comes up a lot with some of my friends and family, and that'll be an upcoming episode. But like, I, I sometimes they don't listen because they don't feel good about themselves, and listening to things about how to like be your brightest makes them feel bad, right? So they're kind of this next one, stonewalling, evasive
Right.
maneuvers. So when you're kind of withdrawing from yourself, from
Yeah.
the things that'll, from any form of improvement or betterment, or even just like learning a skill, or kind of like my I don't struggle in public excuse, right? Like that's a form of
Yeah.
stonewalling. And it's also, I talked about this in a past episode, but if you have an anxious avoidant personality type, that's where you're kind of shutting down, right? You're overwhelmed and you just simply stop responding or doing things.
And I feel like this is almost one of the most insidious things, because I feel like the criticism, the contempt, the defensiveness can show up externally, and other people can actually witness it and
Mm,
maybe be part of what could help you with those. But the stonewalling, I don't think other people would see it. Now, maybe they could, but I always liken that to when I had COVID. So this is not true. It's not exactly what I mean, but I know I've done it besides being ill. I was so sick and felt so sort of separate that I knew there were things that I should be doing that would help me and make me feel better. And I
and do
just
it.
didn't care. I just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't going to do it because I'm was just like, no, apparently I'm just lying in bed.
Well, and when you're thinking about like doing things that don't come easy, doing something new, wanting to make progress or try something in your life, and your inner culture is one that's going to mock you and criticize you.
Oh God. So it's not like you just have one of these things. You could have multiple. You could have
Oh, you're
all
gonna have
of
all
them.
four. Yeah. So
Yes.
it's like, let's say anytime you do something new and you're not gonna be good at it, right? You're probably not going to be immediately good at it and perfect at everything all the time. And so let's say you know that, And you know that when you do inevitably mess up, you're going to tell yourself how stupid you are, be reminded how dumb you are, and this and that. And then you're going to feel guilt and shame. And then you're going to just have even more contempt for yourself.
And then you're
And
never going to try it again. And you're going to be defensive about never trying it
and so
again.
then you're just not going to do it. You're just not going to do it. Right. And so stonewalling to me is the one that deters healing and progress in life the most. For example, I once worked with a woman. She had worked with a company for over 10 years. Not a healthy company to work at. And it also wasn't doing well financially. They are inevitably not going to make it much longer. And she is a fabulous person, employee, great at what she does, definitely the best in that company, in that area. And anytime I would encourage her, hey, if you wanted to apply, I'd be a reference, it'd be a referral. Here's some jobs I think you'd be good at. She'd always say, I could never do that. I couldn't start over. Yeah. Like, I'm only good because I've been here. And I'm like, you're not starting over from scratch. You're starting from experience. And you got to where you are now because of your inner skills, right? Like, you're really good because you are really good. So will all the knowledge transfer? No. Will you have to learn some new things? Yes. But this was all new ones too, right? Like, you just learned 3 new things today and you don't even view them as new because it's in this purview. But she's stonewalled herself. She'll be there until they let her go, right? She'll never go out on her own. And it's so disappointing because you could tell it was affecting her mental and emotional and physical health being in that environment every day.
Yeah, that's really too bad. I feel like I was doing, or I do that, a little bit of stonewalling when I'm like, oh, the negative talk starts to happen and I just like shove it over here. I feel like that's some stonewalling too, because I'm not even going to look at it.
Yep.
Or interact with it or anything. I wonder too, I know that I know it's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and not the 5, but I'm wondering too if projection comes into play with any of these.
I think projection comes through the criticism and the contempt.
Okay.
In a way when you're dealing with another. Yeah. But that, I mean, and for what we're doing, it's more, we're focusing on inner self-talk. But you know, that could be a negative pattern that you create where when you're really negative internally, it's going to start to affect your external relationships.
Yeah.
So there may be other negative patterns or internal processes that come up, but those are just to get you started. happy fun times, guys. So I will flip the script though. Like,
thanks for more homework, Tracy.
Well, so the Gottmans, for their 4, they have what they call antidotes. Now, because it's very relational and there are 2 external parties, I'm not going to take theirs for this. I found some other ideas for identifying and replacing for healthy and productive internal communication. First and foremost, compassion. Grace. We talk about that a lot. I'm going to throw this out there. Praise. I have started saying, good job, Tracy, and not in a mocking or sarcastic way.
Which I know can be hard for you sometimes.
So hard. Loving kindness, which is Tibetan medicine practice. But so practicing that internally and on yourself as well, approaching yourself with loving kindness. Responsibility, the opposite of the treat yourself, in too far in the wrong direction. But I really do feel like replacing the defensiveness with taking responsibility and accountability, right? Like,
I like that. Yes.
Yeah. Patience.
Oh yeah.
Tolerance. Are you patient with yourself ever? Do you have tolerance with yourself? And then appreciation. So I think I've shared in the past before, I've seen some people on social media that end every day or start every day, or at least say once a day, I love you and your name, whether to the mirror or recording it or whatever. But so I end the day with like, thank you. You did what you could. And like, I mean it. Like, and again, you can't be mocking yourself. You have to be sincere.
Yes.
But just like acknowledging like, I'm okay today. I got through today. Good job. Good job.
I have said good job. Yeah, I have said good job to myself as well, not in a sarcastic way. This also makes me think of something that you said some episode. I don't remember which one it was, but you said, because we talk about forgiveness, but you actually brought up apologizing to yourself. So I wonder what would happen if you were in a like criticizing yourself role. And then all of a sudden you said, it was like you viewed it as if, what if you were saying that to someone else? And then you stopped yourself with an apology, like, I am so sorry, Amy. I apologize for saying those horrible things about myself.
And I'll do that. So kind of like how you said you'll stop the negative self-talk and like lock it in a room and just be like, no, we're
Yeah.
not doing this. I'll stop it and be like, oh, no, I'm wrong. Like, I'm really sorry. I just said that. So I will like, I don't something with my fridge or groceries or like cleaning or a mess or something. Like I was getting into that negative self-talk and you always do this. And I was like, you know what? No, I apologize. Like I shouldn't talk to you like that. And I'll say it out loud. I will say it. Oh, I live alone, so I can be crazy.
Yeah. Well, I don't, and I can still be crazy.
Your husband
but
expects it.
I think that I need to start doing that, because me locking them in a room is not dealing with them. Apologizing to yourself is actually looking at it and then taking care of something, or at least taking the first step to take care of something.
Yeah, I'll even be like, you know what? That's not very fair. That wasn't very fair in this moment. Or be like, or even like I'll say the negative stuff out loud and then I'll stop and pause and be like, wow, you're really irritable today. Like, that was excessive. That was excessive. I'm not going to correct it. You weren't necessarily wrong, but like, that was a tad much. Like let's dial it back down. Let's what do we really need right now?
Yeah.
Like, what would the appropriate response have been? Right. Like, so acknowledging you do need the release, but like, just bring it in. But so, I have another assessment. So once you kind of figure out the what you're doing, right?
Okay.
So we need the what. Then you do a root cause assessment to figure out the why. And we have many episodes that relate to this. We have our inner child here, shadow work one, and things like that. But so you have to know what you're forgiving and why, because no one likes an insincere blanket apology for something that's going to happen again, right? Because you didn't address the root cause.
Yes.
Right. And then my favorite thing to come out of that Tibetan medicine and the loving kindness practice is you need to heal your mental poisons.
How?
By taking an antidote. I just made that connection.
I just told you.
When you do the root cause assessment, you can Google those, use the business ones, the 5 whys. Like, it's just kind of like, get out of problem solving mode, right? Like, we're not just trying to fix the immediate situation, but like, okay, I spoke negatively to myself. Why did I do that? Why did I use this language? Why do I think this? Why do I think nobody likes me? Why do I think I'm not attractive or unlovable or stupid?
You're right. Once you get to the whys, the why is the healing.
It leads to the healing. It helps you show
yes
where to go with it.
Yes. Okay.
So there's going to be, when you do the root cause, there are 2 options. It's from others, it's from self, right? So there's 2 ways.
There's only 2 answers for
there's many answers within those, but so you alluded to this at the top of the hour, like what's been ingrained in you? What did you grow up hearing? How were you raised? How were you spoken to by adults, right? So look to that, again, that shadow work, the inner child healing, possibly therapy, right? Like the others piece, it's your responsibility. You are now accountable for it. You weren't responsible for it happening, but you are accountable for what you do with it now.
Absolutely. So I agree with that for anything, actually. Once you understand what it was that happened, like then it's your responsibility to move forward. Yes.
And you also, that healing part of the others piece does not involve others. It might involve professional support, but it can't be contingent upon that person speaking to you differently if they're still in your life, that person apologizing to you, right? This is now an internal process that you have accepted, and their internal scripts you're doing that you need to heal how you heal them, right?
Yes.
And so, it's just going to be key identifying, do I need therapy for this? Which I highly recommend an impartial person to validate your feelings and help you figure out new lenses to look from. But another way that others impact our internal monologue and self-talk is through comparison. especially with social media
Yes.
these days, or looking at other people, or constant
Yeah.
podcasts on personal development, everybody sharing their experiences and what works for them and why their life is so perfect,
Yeah.
right? So look at how much comparison you're doing.
Yes.
So those are some ideas for others. Again, do your own root cause analysis, but just like I said, 2 categories to start with: outside of me and inside of me. Inside of you, are you projecting negative energy at yourself? And are those thoughts coming from a place of perceived lack? What do you think that you lack? Why do you think you lack it? Why aren't you letting yourself have it?
It almost feels like it almost feels like it would never originate with self. It almost feels like it would always originate outside yourself. And then the self sort of nurtures it into this thing that it becomes. I don't know. Can it originate just with self? Don't you always need outside influences?
That's like the nature versus nurture debate. That's a whole nother episode,
Oh,
is like
yeah.
how much of us is molded as a kid. And then again, how much does the personality and the genetics you're born with influence how much you're impacted by others.
Right.
But I think, like, let's say maybe the root cause of me calling myself stupid and unlovable is from a childhood wound or trauma of some sort. As an adult now, it's going to spin off and look differently than that childhood wound and that original root cause or those
Right.
original events and sayings that happen. And
Right.
so I could be perceiving myself as unlovable because I don't have a certain type of relationship and I'm lacking all this stuff. But if I were to actually look at my life, I would see how unbelievably loved I am. Right. And so it's a perceived lack of a certain type of love,
Mm-hmm.
and then assigning labels and reasons why I don't have it. Again, you might want a therapist. This might get tricky.
Yeah, because I don't know that we always have the discernment to say,
This is
to
heavy
be
stuff.
able, yeah, to say, oh, let me take a different look and see how lovable I am.
And that's going to be the trick with the self-assessment of your negative self-talk, is there's no impartial person. And so
oh boy,
that's why,
right.
and like even a close friend, either again, it's going to be somebody who means really well and loves you and maybe gaslights you a little bit too well, right?
Yeah,
And like
yeah.
over toxic positivities you in an effort to make you feel better, or it's a frenemy and now they know your secrets and what. And so again, like, trust yourself, trust your gut, know who you can talk to. But again, if you can afford it, sliding fee scales, therapy is good for that. But there is one thing that I bring up all the time that I think is important, or what most interested in me in this topic, kind of goes back to that intent versus action or behavior I bring up all the time. We tend to judge ourselves on intent and other people on actions and
Yes.
behaviors.
Yes.
Since we are our longest running relationship, I'm wondering how in debt we are to ourselves from broken promises, of all the intentions we've had and the lack of follow through that came from it. Are you keeping score without realizing it?
And so do you
No
think that
longer
keeping
trust yourself.
score, that keeping score is then turns into the negative self-talk and the
And
contempt
feeding
and
that
all
you
of
never,
that?
you don't,
Yes.
the contempt, the criticism,
Yes,
all
I
that.
think that's it. That's amazing.
And
Yeah.
so, you have to ask yourself, or a way to overcome that, which we'll get to for the self-forgiveness piece, but it's also like, just manage your own expectations, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you putting ridiculous expectations on yourself,
Yes.
and calling it SMART goals?
Oh dear God.
And then with that, and my accountability partner brought this up when I was hard on my lack of accountability in April, is it all or nothing thinking? And so I didn't have the energy to do any of my routine, or to do all of my routine, so I did none of my morning routine. And he's like, you don't have to meditate for 10 minutes, you can meditate for 1 minute. And I'm like, no, I don't meditate. Like, I'm not gonna, if I'm gonna bother to meditate at all, I'm gonna meditate for this long. And he's like,
Yeah.
just just pick one thing from your routine. Don't be like, oh, I've been sick for 3 weeks and now I have to be 100% again, right? Like grow into it.
Right.
And so I think that debt accrues from the all or nothing thinking as well.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So in the last few minutes here, how do you have self-forgiveness then? You have the what, you have the why. Now you need to fix it and also reduce how often it can happen again. Because let's be honest, longest running relationship, we can't actually divorce ourselves, right? Like there's only so much disassociation in life you can do. It's gonna happen again. Manage that expectation. You're gonna disappoint yourself. You're gonna falter. You're gonna fail. How can we do that and still be kind in our response and have compassion to ourselves?
I think yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you said it earlier. I think it starts with an apology to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And self-forgiveness can take strength. So I'd advise bulking up on your mental fortitude of all the things you already know or other people have told you that you like about yourself and that are good, and create some affirmations around that, some good reminders, maybe some reminders about affirmations about I am a compassionate and loving person to myself, right? Like reminding yourself at the start and end of every day. But just thinking about like that apology, how would you forgive a friend? And how would you want to be forgiven? So think of the external and how can you apply that internally? And when you come up with that apology, I think especially for the first one, for it to really matter, it's got to be big. It's got to be grand. It can't, like in the moment ones are great to start off with for just when you start noticing these things now. So kind of like I said, when I was insulting myself in the refrigerator, I was just like, that was unfair. You're actually doing a good job.
I think you could almost make a ritual out of the first one.
Exactly. Some sort of, or even like a daily ceremony as part of your journal practice or your gratitude practice. Like bring that ritual into your life. So for the first apology, maybe you could write it down and burn it, right? We love fire here. So dance it out, music, right? Like create something that's special to you, right? And honor that. Like when you have a relationship with other people, you have things that are sacred to that. So create something that is, it'll last, right? That it's something that you can do. It's sustainable. But that it's also really meaningful so that it makes an impact that inspires and sustains the change you want to make, right?
Yeah.
So I also want to bring up cognitive behavioral therapy. So replacing that stop that you do. I've talked about this before. I have named my negative thoughts Chad. So anytime I have a negative thought, it's a byproduct of my telepathic nemesis, Chad. And sometimes I do tell Chad to shut the F up when it's just too much. Like when it's just those times when that negative self-talk is just on a roll, you're having a bad day, nothing's going right. I will use curse language with him and tell him to go on his way. And if that's not enough for you, you can create a superhero telepathic friend, the devil and angel on your shoulders, if you will, right? Like just find a way to replace the talk. But I also like to shut the talk down in addition to just, I don't want to toxic positivity myself, right? Like, but yeah, so you just, essentially you have to do conflict management, right? Internally, that's what this is. So build forgiveness into your daily relationship with self so that you can front load this routine and have discernment versus judgment with you.
I love that. Thanks. And with that, if this episode spoke to your soul, please share it with a friend. And if you have time, give us some love on your preferred platform with a rate, review, and subscribe. You can also reach out to us via Instagram and YouTube under The Brightly Podcast or via email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, we hope you have a bright and beautiful day.